in this lesson we're going to have a look at snow on mountains, and what we have here is a picture of the Matterhorn in Switzerland. Right, now for this painting we're going to use the number 10 round brush, and we're also going to use the rigger. Right, now in this photograph, as you can see, the peak is sat right in the centre of the picture, but my instinct says I want to move it just slightly to the right. But to balance the peak, because it's moved off centre, what I'm going to do is leave a little bit of white cloud area here just as a little bit of a counterbalance. Right, now don't forget we've moved the mountain peak over slightly, so here we've got that sort of situation. Don't worry if you don't get it exactly right. This, after all, is an exercise in painting mountains in a general sort of sense. Now, as you can see from the photograph, the angle it's taken brings the far edge of the mountain right across this point here. And if you remember what we looked at in the second video about composition, well, what we really need is to have that below that ridge, or extend that ridge, or have that coming across the top like that. What I'm going to do, in fact, is extend this ridge very slightly so it cuts it off at that point. I'm only going to use, for the most part, 2 colours in this. Well, I'm actually going to use 3. I'm going to bring a little bit of lemon yellow in later on to add a little bit of greenery for the trees down here, but for the most part I'm going to mix the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber here. But the first thing I'm going to do is to paint in the sky, and the second thing I'm going to do is to turn the picture upside down like that. If we painted the sky and stopped it dead there, because the drawing board is on this little bit of a slope, it means that the water would run down here and it would dry, and it would form a little bit of a sharp tide mark as the pigment was washed down and all collected at the line of where the edge of the mountain was. You've got to pretend that's absolutely clean water. It doesn't matter because it's going to be blue anyway, but at least you can see where I'm actually working, because even though it's a relatively cloudless blue sky that we're working on, there'll still be a lightening of the sky immediately above the line of the mountain, and it'll be strengthening in this area here, in what of course is the top of the sky. Right, that's, incidentally, I always tend to go round the object, whether it be a castle or in this case a mountain or whatever, just round that first, and that gets the water set in the right position like that. Okay, and then we'll just add a little bit of blue to that so you can see where I'm working. Now, of course, it's dead easy to bring the water down over the big areas of sky like that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to be quite careful here. I want to leave just a fleck or two of unpainted paper just to give us a couple of wisps of clouds, as I said, to balance off the mountain face here. Having done this light area here, I'm going to just go back in it, because that's going to dry very much lighter when it is dry. And you can see how much easier it is now because I've put that water into the sky. Whoops, because I've put that water. Don't worry if that goes on. There we are. Just going to take the water out of where the snow will be. And because you've got a relatively simple and strong focal point, which of course is the mountain, you don't need a great complicated sky to compete with it. Because you're getting towards the top of the sky, you need to start getting the paint actually stronger, so you're working back to front from the way you would normally go. And of course this is where the snow is going to be, just in this area here, so we've got a lovely contrast already. Okay, now they'll dry in quite nicely, and although that looks quite strong at the moment compared to the mountains, once we start putting in the colours on the mountains and that starts drying off, there'll be quite a difference. By putting the overall shadow wash on first, letting that dry, when we put the thicker and stronger painting for the rocks and the rock shadows, then it won't run. If we did it the other way around and put the strong paint in for the rock shadows, and even if we let that dry and then swept over it with a very wet but watery wash of blue shadow colour, you'd find that the blue shadow colour would start melting the dark shadow colour underneath and making it spread and become blurred and blotchy. I'm moving this around fairly quickly because this paint is drying quite fast because the room I'm in is quite warm. Now you can see already what we've created is something that looks half reasonable, and we've only used one colour. We've used blue and we've left the rest of the paper white. Right, now I'm mixing a blue-grey colour with the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. You can see it's still quite bluey grey, even though I'm putting a brown in. And what I'm going to do now is just generally paint the rocky outcrops, the main areas, and you can see that I'm just concentrating actually on making sure that I have an area that's going to stand out here against the top of the sky. I'm going to use the rigger in a minute or two to get the smaller, more random shape. Now there's a long angular ridge there like that, bit more of a slope like that. There's nothing wrong with talking to yourself either, by the way. Just encourage yourself along and just tell yourself what you're actually painting. It doesn't half help actually. People around you think you're mad. Don't worry about that. You know you're not mad. People think I'm mad. Well, in fact, most of them are convinced I'm mad. My so-called friends. They said I was mad when I set this website up. It'd never work. They couldn't have been more wrong. Must admit, I've been astonished at the popularity of the website and how many people are across the world are into painting. Delighted, mind. Delighted to have been able to help so many people. Right, I've filled in most of the mountain as I wanted to. I'm just moving on to the rigger now, just to add a few more, if you like, scrapey little bits. Oh, is there such a word as scrapey? Well, there is now. There is now. I'll just use it. And it's just really just to scrape in some of the smaller, more random bits of the mountain that I can't achieve with the bigger brush. Now I'm going to add a bit more burnt umber into the shadow mix, because here we've got this rock face which is a sort of a light brownish rock when you look at it on the photograph. Right, I don't want this to be anything like as dark as the other shadow colour, but I certainly want it to look right. So I'm just going to have two colours here. I'm just going to have this dark green, which is actually going to be the lighter parts of the trees, and then I'm going to just drop in some of this darker colour here, to which I've added the burnt umber. I'm imagining the tree line has just about got as far as it's going to go up here. It's a little bit cold and a little bit windy, no doubt, even for fir trees, but it also gives a sense of scale, because we all know that fir trees can be a couple of 100 feet high at times, or 100 feet or whatever. Now we'll probably start to emphasise it a bit more by putting in this darker bluey green colour, to which I've added rather more burnt umber. Right, well, I'm just, as you can see, just giving this sort of raggedy effect here, because it can give a whole heap of different techniques, and this is one where it gives the whole forest of fir trees in just a few minutes. Now there's nothing, I can assure you, when you're painting mountains, nothing gives a sense of scale more than putting in a couple of tiny little ant-like figures. In this case, looking up and admiring the awesome size of the Matterhorn mountain. So there we are, a mountain with snow. I hope you got something from that.